Thanks for joining us. Imagine starring in your own TV show as a teenager and having a pop princess for a big sister. Lynn Spears says all the chaos and trauma of growing up Spears is something she long suppressed. It took a near fatal tragedy for her to confront some painful truths. I sat down with Lynn for a wide-ranging exclusive TV interview on everything from Britney's conservatorship, her own mental health struggles, to how Lynn found her voice. Why do you think it makes you emotional still all these years later?
I just thank God that thank God I stood up for myself and said exactly what I wanted.
Lynn Spears remembers being pregnant at 16 and feeling utterly isolated, a scandalized teenage TV star.
Everyone, of course, initially was completely shocked, and they're like, this is a baby having a baby. And in those moments, I just felt really alone.
Jamie, this way! Spears says she grew up pretending that everything was perfect, even when it wasn't, as her family often focused instead on her world-famous sister Britney's turbulent life.
You wrote, and I'm going to quote you, "The entire Spears team was already caught up in my sister's PR difficulties, and everyone around me just wanted to make the issue disappear."
Yeah, I think that the easy thing for possibly them would have been let's just get this over with, and you go back to being the perfect little sister, because that's your role.
As her sister's career reached the highest heights, Lynn had forged her own path to stardom on Nickelodeon as the feisty lead in Zoe 101.
So, do I get to hear the song before you guys put it in the time capsule?
I feel like Zoe was what I always wanted to be. I was just like every other teenager, very insecure about a lot of things about myself, but also trying to pretend like I was perfect, I guess.
But not everything was perfect. Behind the glitz and the glamour was profound anxiety, grappling with the pressures of fame and a chaotic family.
I've never shared anything.
Now 30, the married mother of 2 daughters says she's breaking the cycle by breaking her silence about her childhood traumas, her struggles with mental health, and the pressures of growing up Spears. In her new book, Things I Should Have Said.
It was really important to me to, first off, honor my voice. I have to do it, or how else can I expect my daughters to stand up for themselves?
Do you worry that by speaking your truth, that it will harm your relationships?
Well, nobody ever really considered me, but I think that everyone is allowed to say their truth.
When news of her pregnancy broke in 2007, it created a media feeding frenzy. Lynn facing the same heated circus that followed her famous sister Britney's every move.
Why are you here? Other than to shame me and to benefit off of a young girl who's going through something already so traumatic and so deep and personal. But now you're going to put me on a magazine cover and call me a slut for it. It just really, it's so unacceptable. We say we do better, but now we just go into the comments on Instagram and do it.
Lynn claims her family and management team sent her away to a remote cabin somewhere in the snowy Northeast to avoid the media. No phone, no contact with the outside world for weeks.
What was I going to do? I was a kid, and maybe this isn't my best interest, and maybe this is what I'm supposed to do, because of course I don't want to be, hounded by the paparazzi, but it felt like I was really being alienated.
Lynn also says that her family life had long been plagued by her father's past drinking. According to the New York Times, court papers show he attended rehab for alcoholism in 2004.
You wrote in the book, "He spent most of my life in that cycle of ruinous behavior. His bouts of drinking always caused me periods of torment and sorrow."
It was created a lot of anxiety of the not knowing what I was going to get, and also feeling like I didn't have anybody there to just cut it out until it could be consistent.
But while Lynn was grappling with the fallout over pregnancy, her sister was struggling. A bitter divorce, and Britney recently lost custody of her 2 young sons. Trapped by the relentless flash of cameras, she shaved her own head, and what seemed to be a mental breakdown coming to a head in a 2007 confrontation with paparazzi. Lynn says over the years, she'd already noticed Britney's behavior begin to change.
In the book, you describe an incident where Britney takes a knife, says she's scared, and locks you and herself into a room. Why did you want to include that in the book?
Because first off, I think that experiencing my own panic attacks and how sometimes we can feel in those moments is important, but also it's important to remember that I was a kid in that moment. I was scared. That was an experience I had, but I also was fearful to really say anything because I didn't want to upset anybody, but I also was so upset that she didn't feel safe.
Words that you've used in the book to describe her behavior over your lifetime was erratic, paranoid, spiraling. How do you see your sister's state of mind currently?
I can't really speak to anyone else's state of mind. I don't think that's fair, but I'm allowed to say how I felt in those because that matters. It matters that I was in pain. It matters. It doesn't matter where they came from.
In 2008, after 2 hospitalizations, the court gave their father, Jamie Spears, legal control over Brittany's personal, professional, and financial affairs. The conservatorship was initially seen by some as a stabilizing force in her life. Brittany released 4 albums and performed nearly 250 shows in her Las Vegas residency. While dad Jamie was conservator, Jamie Lynn says father and daughter tried to stay sober together. You describe the fact that your father in the conservatorship was taking sobriety tests alongside Brittany as part of that.
I just probably selfishly looked at it as everybody's sober right now. I don't have to be anxious for the first time, there's actual people making sure everybody's on the right track, and I didn't have to worry what I was walking into.
How would you describe your relationship with him now?
It's a real time, real life. It's messy, and I'm working through it. I have good days and bad days, and I think the relationship stands is that he's still my father, and I have to acknowledge that in a responsible way.
Last summer, at the height of the Free Britney movement, Britney spoke out in court against the conservatorship, calling it abusive and overly controlling. The pop star saying she wanted to sue her family, lashing out at her father in particular, saying he should be put in jail. Jamie Spears and his attorneys have consistently claimed that everything was done under the authority of the conservatorship and with Britney's best interests in mind.
Do you agree with her assessment that your father was out of line?
Honestly, I just believe that if my sister wanted to be out of the conservatorship, then that conversation should be had, and she should be able to facilitate that.
Britney's conservatorship lasted for 13 years before it was officially terminated by a judge in November.
What was your reaction when the conservatorship was dissolved?
When it was dissolved, I was happy. I think that for me, if that's what makes Brittany and everyone else happy, that's what should happen. And that's all it is. It has so very little to actually do with me except for the well-being of my family members.
Jamie Lynn saying for the first time that she even tried to give Brittany the resources she needed to end the conservatorship.
I've always been my sister's biggest supporter. So when she needed help, I set up ways to do so. Went out of my way to make sure that she had the contacts she needed to possibly go ahead and end this conservatorship. But how many times can I take the steps without, she has to walk through the door.
There's been speculation of a rift. Many of Britney's fans attacking Jamie Lynn online, noting that Britney unfollowed her on Instagram. Britney also posting last July about her sister's tribute performance at the 2017 Radio Disney Awards, writing, "I don't like that my sister showed up at an awards show and performed my songs to remixes. My so-called support system hurt me deeply."
Honestly, it was somewhat confusing to me about that, and I actually have spoke to her about that. And I was doing a tribute to honor my sister and all the amazing things that she's done.
But you've cleared that up with her?
I have cleared up with the fact that I don't think she's personally upset with me about that.
Jamie Lynn says their relationship came to a head during the pandemic. She writes that Britney came at me screaming and getting up in my face while she was holding her toddler Ivy in her arms.
She cursed at me, and so I just walked out of the room because I was like, we're just all family under one roof. Like, I'm not trying to argue. And when I tried to remove myself from the situation, that's when I guess she just got really angry. And my oldest daughter tried to, mediate the situation. I hated that. Like, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're 12.
But rather than respect everyone's wishes, Jamie Lynn says her family was reverting to unhealthy patterns. Her parents' response?
They told me that I shouldn't be upset. Like, I can't upset Brittany. I said, you just saw me and my children be upset. When will I matter?
Despite their complicated relationship, Jamie Lynn says while the world idolized her big sister, Brittany, who's 10 years older, was like a second mother to her.
So I feel like she was like I love her that much, and to have, it's just so innocent to love your siblings, and especially me, because I loved her like she was my mama,
What happened to that love? What has caused this rift between you?
That love is still there, 100%. I love my sister. I've only ever loved and supported her and done what's right by her, and she knows that. So I don't know why we're in this position right now.
ABC News reached out to Lynn Spears and her father, Jamie, for comment. They did not respond.
You're looking very glamorous and very Hollywood right now, but you're not very Hollywood, are you?
I would say that this is not my everyday look. No, I'm typically running the kids back and forth to softball and school and stuff like that, and a big T-shirt and some shorts from the gym or whatever it is, just trying to make it wherever my kids need to be on time.
Against the odds, after splitting with Maddie's father, Jamie Lynn managed to build a low-key life for herself in Louisiana and started acting again. She married another Jamie, Watson, a successful businessman. They welcomed baby Ivy 3 years ago.
I loved reading about your color-coordinated calendars. I think every mom can relate to that. And yet, what does it say about you and how much energy and focus you put into parenting?
I think I have like a hypersensitivity to like making things feel really stable and secure, especially if I have to travel for work, and I never want them to feel like anything's left up to question. And it just helps me feel secure, and also I want them to feel secure, like their mom thought of that for them.
But that sense of security was almost destroyed 5 years ago when a then 8-year-old Maddie, the baby she fought so hard to have, was in a horrific ATV accident.
Not even like by the pond, and all of a sudden I just see her take this hard turn into like the back part of the pond. So the best that I can reason is she tried to get out in the safety netting, her head got caught in it. She was trapped.
The family frantically fought to rescue her, but she says Maddie remained underwater for more than 5 minutes.
What stays with you from that day?
When I thought that I'd lost her, I was so afraid that her last thought was, why didn't Mama save me? I just hope she knows that like I was doing everything I could if that was the last thing that she lived,
First responders were on the scene within minutes. They freed Maddie and rushed her to the hospital, where she was put on a ventilator.
You describe your priest administering last rites.
It was horrible to see your baby like that.
She was not unresponsive.
I just wanted her spirit to hear somebody speak to it, if that's all that was in there. And obviously her spirit was not ready to go.
Maddie made a miraculous recovery.
There was that moment where she opens her eyes and you register that she's there.
That was the first moment, I saw her in there, it was like I knew she was in there because she kind of looked like, where am I? Like, what is this? And that was my Maddie, registering. I knew that wasn't like a blimp or like just her eyes opening for some other reason. Like, I knew she was able to understand, where am I? Why am I in this hospital?
And then what were the first words that she spoke to you when she came out of it?
She was just saying really bizarre things, that she recognized everybody, but she didn't recognize me. The doctors would come in and ask you, who's this? Asked her, they said, who's this? And she goes, Carrie Underwood, but she looks kind of like my mom in those clothes, because I had on men's sweats that were brought to me. So basically what she was saying was, you look like Carrie Underwood, but you dress like my mother.
Jamie Lynn says the experience brought her closer to God.
You said it. Sometimes you have to be rocked to your core
Yeah.
in order to understand what your core is.
It so quickly comes to light what's important when you walk through something like that. I lost my baby and then was immediately given her back. Do you know how many people would give anything for that? And I was given that blessing.
Jamie Lynn says her daughter's brush with death forced her to re-examine her entire life, including her childhood traumas and the mental health struggles she had suppressed for years.
It really was like to the point where my panic attacks were all consuming, where I'm touching the doorknob 7 times. I've got to, it was consuming my life to the point where it physically was taking over me. And I went and finally spoke to a therapist. At the time, I took medicine and got back to a place to where I felt stable.
So what were the overarching diagnoses?
Depression, anxiety, and OCD. It was weird how I would use my OCD almost trying to fix my depression. I felt like if I did certain things certain number of times, it'd make it feel better. Or that would make something bad not happen. That was my thing.
It's quite clear throughout the book that you've come to a lot of self-discovery, a lot of painful realizations.
I think that when your worst fear happens, you get a lot less afraid of everything else. It made me reevaluate everything and who I was as a person and where I needed to be better.